Okay, so um, later on we may be doing some other prayers at the beginning, but as we had done last term, let's begin by doing a little bit of meditation to calm our minds, especially, this is our first class, and to try to set a very special motivation, both for tonight and for this whole course. The reason for doing so, not just to accumulate knowledge, but especially not just for knowledge for this life, but in order to accumulate all of the equipment, so to speak, that we need in order to practice for the benefit of others, to make our hearts bigger, to overcome our faults, our attachment, our pride, our jealousy, our depression. So let's begin with a very simple, starting very simply, sitting comfortably with your back erect and watching your breathing, first of all. Try to progressively take your attention away from the senses and focus just on the inhalation and the exhalation, recognizing them individually. Just be that breath. Let go of all other thoughts and worries and preoccupations. Note when your mind is partially engaging in other activities, watching the activity at your eyes or ears or your body consciousness, or just engaging in other thinking. Try to disengage it away from that, back to just watching the breathing. Especially at the end points when the direction of the breathing changes. Don't let your mind wander. mind is somewhat concentrated, or quieted at least, follow one breath up as though you were following it up your nostrils, as though it, in the psychic body, went up to the crown of your head, to your throat, to your heart. And just remain in that area with your concentration, leaving the observation of the breathing. Just watch the mind. The mind watching itself. And between the busyness, the clutter, the worry, the fear, the excitement, maybe confusion also, there are moments of quiet and clarity. See if you can hold on to those moments when they occur. Think of withdrawing your attention away from the outer senses to your heart, like a breath on a mirror. As it dissipates, comes to a little circle. Whatever occurs in your mind, don't grasp to it, don't perpetuate it by your fascination with it or your worry about it. Just let it go. See if you can again perceive the conventional nature of your mind. It's clear light, spacious, unobstructed, unobstructing nature. This is our inner potential within which we can develop all the good qualities, from which we can extricate, eliminate all faults, all bad habits, all negative states of mind. However long it takes. Think how fortunate we are to have this opportunity to be alive while the Dharma is still existing in the world, to have spiritual friends and patrons to provide the conditions like this to meet and think about the Dharma. And also how fragile, short-lived this situation is. Just some conditions changing in our body, outer conditions, inner conditions. Either our body becomes incapable of living, or the conditions to practice the Dharma disappear. But even while this exists, it's dissipating in every moment. We're getting closer to the inevitable end of our life. Knowing what we can do with this life, rather than simply accumulating more pleasures of the senses, or food, or clothing, or protection, that we can actually create the causes of future happiness, create the causes of actually leaving cyclic existence, finding real liberation, peace of mind, even developing good heart and altruistic wish to help sentient beings. We can do that with this lifetime. Recognizing, however, that it's changing every moment. We're approaching our death with every instant. Develop a sense of purpose, of resolution. I have to make use of this incredible opportunity. All other living beings have exactly the same potential of the mind behind our individual karmic differences, our appearances, our present states of mind that seem to be elevated or depressed or whatever. All of us have exactly the same nature of mind, clear light. We've been intimately related with every living being over numberless lives. Whatever problems we may have had this lifetime, or whatever delight we may have had in their companionship this lifetime, all of that has happened again and again in equal amounts over numberless lives in the past. All these beings are exactly like us, want to be happy, want to be free of suffering. And the most perfect Buddha taught the most sublime purpose that we can use this life for is to develop that ability to help sentient beings perfectly, to become enlightened, selfless, wise, kind, loving, compassionate, skillful. So think, for that purpose, for that aim, I'm going to participate in the class tonight, and in this, as long as I can, in this series of study as the great practitioners of the past in Tibet and India have done, great Buddhist saints, studied about the mind, studied the Buddha's teachings, revered by the great meditators also, as a path that can give us the necessary equipment we need in listening to the teachings in order to contemplate them, in order to meditate on them. So for the dual purposes, my own aim of finding the Dharmakaya, becoming totally blissful and free, and for the purpose of others, to emanate aid and guidance for them through the various form bodies of the Buddha. I think I'm going to listen to the teachings both tonight and in this series, in this lifetime, for that aim. And then relax. Bring your attention back to the present. Like a large coliseum here, from one side to the other. So welcome again. Did everyone, were there enough copies of the text? There weren't, Venerable. Oh, okay. It's one of those recurring problems. Okay. So, this is the text we're going to be studying in this course. This course is on a particular aspect of Buddhist psychology, on the mind and the mental factors. And Venerable, I'm sure, will make copies for those of you who don't have. There is a pretty nice supplementary text, if you wanted to get, by one of my teachers, Geshe Rapton, lectures that he gave many years ago in Switzerland, called The Mind and Its Function. Some of you might have got this when we studied Lorig before. Okay. So this has two parts. One that was talking about a course that we studied before, Lorig, and one part that's talking about the psychological aspect of the course. So this subject matter is, I think, incredibly applicable to practice. This is the kind of thing that I don't think one has to sort of wonder how it might be applied to practice, because all of our life activity, all of our happiness, all of our suffering depends upon our mind. We can see that. It doesn't depend primarily on outer conditions. Primarily depends upon our state of mind. Our outer conditions can be really terrible. Things could be falling, as it says in Lama Chopa, undesired suffering can be falling like rain. Does that sound familiar? I mean, in your own experience. And your mind could be very blissful in the midst of that. On the other hand, you could be having all sorts of seemingly nice conditions, good friends, success in life, seeming pleasures of the senses and so forth, but be unsatisfied and maybe jealous and unhappy. So the mind is really the core, the Buddha taught, the core essential point to look for, to look at and investigate in order to find happiness. When we start to get a little bit of control of our own mind, then we can start to help others also. It's almost, I was reading a book the other day that was alluding to this thing that happens on the airplanes. When they tell you, if these gas masks were to fall, of course they'll probably not fall, but has anyone ever been on an airplane when they fell? The oxygen masks? What did they tell you to do first? Yeah, okay. So that's the point. So why did they say to do that? You might think, well, that's heartless. You should put it on your little child first.
You can't put it on.
Exactly. So in order to help others, you have to be able to be at least a little bit together. So when we talk about the stages of developing the mind, first of all, even if you have the intention of really being totally altruistic, that's your ultimate aim, somehow you have to look at your own mind, first of all, your own garbage, clean it up, clean up your own act, get strong. Then you'll be in a position not only to avoid harming others, if you're less angry, less proud, less jealous, less boisterous, less depressed, you'll actually have the time and space, as your mind gets more content, to seek methods to help others. But you have to first of all be able to control your own mind. It's not something that you immediately set out to try to benefit others before having some control of your own mind. I think that's the example of the oxygen masks on the plane, kind of useful. So we're fortunate to have a chance to study this text. This is a text written by, as you see on the cover page, a great Tibetan saint called Geshe Gyaltsen. If I'm not mistaken, I have to check again. I think Geshe Gyaltsen was also called Sechen Ling Rinpoche. He was. I'll check again next time. There's a monastery, very famous monastery in Tibet, that he was one of the main teachers at, and he was a great scholar. And this is a very interesting text. It wasn't usually part of the curriculum, say, in the main monasteries when they studied mind and mental factors. It was studied something a little bit on the side. And we have an excellent translation by one of our Dakini lady Chinese Singaporean students who's studying in the master's program in Italy. She pronounces her name Siggy. You can see it's Toseji. And she's gone over some previous translations, and I've taken a look at it. It's quite a good translation of this text. So this is the text that we'll be using. It's one of the classic texts, and something that most of the lamas in the Tibetan tradition, especially in the Gelugpa tradition, would know of. It's not like some obscure, strange text that people say, "Oh, I've never heard of that one." I think it was translated many years ago by this translator Herbert Gunther. Have you heard of Gunther, some of you? I think it's still available maybe in the bookstores. Mind in Buddhist Psychology, I think it is. That translation is a bit difficult to understand because his terminology I think he was into using all sorts of psychological terminology, trying to use, language of modern psychology. So this is more just based on the text itself, which makes a lot of sense. The text by Geshe Rapton, one part of it, the second half of the text, is also talking about mind and mental factors. So those of you who have a chance may find this to be a nice thing to augment your study with. Basically, all of the material, the definitions and the divisions and the way to understand and to identify these mental factors comes from what's called the Abhidharma literature. You know what the Abhidharma is, right? Or is still. Right? Mark, do you know what the Abhidharma was? It's Mark, right? Yeah.
Abhidharma was like explaining cosmology, the Buddhist, how Buddha described how the world, like metaphysics.
In a sense, yeah. Also, one of the big sections of it, there are various sections. One of them is talking about the mind, and basically, when we talk in the Northern Buddhist tradition that came to Tibet, we talk about the two Abhidharmas. We talk about the Mahayana Abhidharma and the Abhidharma of the lesser vehicle, the lesser Abhidharma. That was written by the famous text of that's used was written by Vasubandhu, called the Abhidharma Kosha, and his dear brother Asanga, wrote what is referred to as the Mahayana Abhidharma, the text that's used. That's called the Abhidharma Samuccaya. Had you told me that you had that text, right? The translation of it in English or in French? Or
It's in English.
It's in English. Right. So I'm going to try to get that. So a lot of these definitions you'll see, sometimes it quotes one or the other of those texts, or many other texts when it's going into an explanation of the various factors of mind. And it's good to know. So let's take a look inside. Let's see what we're getting into here. So usually the Tibetan text itself doesn't have a table of contents, but this is useful to see the way the text is set out. First of all, on page, there's some introduction, as you see there, and then it says the explanation of minds. There's about 5 pages talking about mind in general, as opposed to mental factors. And then a large explanation of all of the various mental factors that were explained in the Mahayana Abhidharma. How many mental factors are there? Do you remember? 51. Right? Did you say that? Good. Okay. So I always joke. It's not 50. A lot of times people think 52 because we've studied 52 weeks in the year, right? All our life. You'll probably write that on some exam sometime. Oh yeah, 52. Okay. So those of you who are interested in learning a little bit of Tibetan, hopefully in the hour or so before class on successive days, maybe a couple of the hardy ones can come up to my room and we can have a little class in looking at the Tibetan text. You can make a copy of the Tibetan text itself and study along and learn, see the actual Tibetan script and learn a little Tibetan as we're going along and how the text is translated. So if you're interested, stay after class tonight and we'll talk about that a little bit. So shall we dive in? Shall we dive in? Okay, so on page 7, in parentheses there, of course, it doesn't say, in the Tibetan text doesn't say introduction, it just begins often with a set of verses of praise and supplication. Reason being, in order to create the merit to be able to be successful in writing the text, and in our case, in studying the text. And then there'll be a verse that is kind of like the author's promise, it's sometimes said, or what's another word you can say, sort of like firm kind of determination to write the text. So it begins by saying, I prostrate and go for refuge at all times at the feet of the Holy Venerable Guru, who is inseparable from the protector Manjughosha. Please always take care of me with your great mercy. So this could be understood to be, in general, taking refuge in one's own guru, one's own lama, as a Tibetan word. You know the Tibetan word lama, right? Do you know that word, Amanda? What does lama mean? Yeah?
Well, I know it's teacher.
Can mean teacher, yeah.
That's all.
Sometimes people think it means monk. The word lama doesn't mean monk. It means it's a Tibetan translation of the Sanskrit word guru. So here, to think of one's own teachers as inseparable with the divine wisdom aspect of Buddha, Manjushri or Manjughosha. So taking refuge, prostrating, going for refuge to them. And secondly, there's a praise to Shakyamuni Buddha. You've completed the 2 collections through the force of exalted compassion, eliminated obscuring darkness, and you know all phenomena. Clarifying what you yourself have seen for migrating beings, I bow down to the unsurpassed refuge. Actually, in Sanskrit we say Munindra, the Lord of Munis. The 2 collections, what is that? Red Cross and What are the two collections? Do you know, Brish?
The accumulation of merit and wisdom.
Right. So it's said that in order to achieve enlightenment, you need to have, you need to actually do something. It's not just something that just comes to you, you just sort of get in the right position and suddenly happens to you. You have to create the causes and conditions for that. And basically everything can be included in two kinds of causes and conditions. One on the side of what we say merit, collecting. It's not as though that who is it in Christianity that keeps track of what you did? St. Peter? Maybe at the gate in heaven. I don't know if there's something. It's not. Sometimes people are a little resistant to this. Like they think, just doing it for some kind of brownie points or some kind of merit or something like that. Here, the collection of virtuous karma that we collect is constitutes when aimed, when dedicated toward enlightenment, it helps to constitute the collection of merit. The collection of wisdom comes about when you are able to meditate on the higher wisdom, not just the wisdom of impermanence or other kinds of conventional wisdom, but the wisdom of emptiness that acts as the eye, the eyeball, the sight that can guide us ultimately out of samsara. So we need those two kinds of collection. So here it's praising Lord Buddha, Shakyamuni, who was called the king or the lord of sages, or the Munindra. Like his name was Shakyamuni, the Muni of the Shakya clan. Do you remember some of you took the course on the 12 deeds? Do you remember someone? Maybe someone here that we had some months ago? Maybe there was no. You were here, right? Not for the whole thing. The Buddha himself had various names at various points in his life. When he was a young child, he during the plowing ceremony in the springtime. Do you know this story? No? He sat under a tree and went into trance. And while all the festivities were going on, for many, many hours, he remained in total concentration. A little bit like Venerable here. And afterwards, he was given the name, the sage, or Muni. Muni means the controlled one, or sage of the Shakya clan. So we call Shakyamuni. That wasn't his name at birth. That's one of the various titles he received, but that's one of the titles that he received when he was very young. So here it just says the Munindra, the lord of sages, or lord of munis. You've completed the two collections through the force of exalted compassion, very special compassion. You've eliminated the obscuring darkness, and thereby you know all phenomena. You're omniscient. You make known, you clarify that which you yourself have seen. You clarify that, you make known what you have seen yourself for the benefit of migrating beings. Migrating beings means what? Those people from across the border, or what? Do you know what is your name again? I forgot. This gentleman in the glasses, Steve. Do you know what migrators mean in this kind of literature when we talk about Buddhism?
I would say that was all of us.
That was all of us. Yeah, but I mean, that's probably true. But what would be the defined? Why are we called migrators? Where are we migrating or traveling? In Tibetan, we say droa, and it means those who are going or migrating through cyclic existence, through the 6 realms of cyclic existence, without pause. If we're not in one of the 6 realms, where are we? We could be in the bardo, right? Because the bardo is not one of the 6 realms, but it's also someplace that we migrate. So you've clarified out of your own. It wasn't like some theory that the Buddha was propounding, as I have a sense a lot of the New Age teachers kind of having heard a little, and a little of this, a little Aztec this, a little astrology of that, and they sort of put everything together in a, what's it called, a pistache, and sort of present it as though it's some accomplished system. This is something that the Buddha himself realized, what he saw himself, reality, and he made known for sentient beings. So there's the second stanza is prostration to Shakyamuni. Due to your earnest, single-pointed love for migrating beings, the third stanza, you are known as the protector Maitri in all three realms. This is talking about Maitreya. We say Jamgon. Jampa means the loving one, Maitri, and Gon could be, say, protector or the Lord, loving Lord. To the regent of the conqueror, what does that mean, the regent of the conqueror? Anyone have any idea? Do you know, Elizabeth? No? Yeah.
The region of Shakyamuni Buddha.
The regent. What is a regent? Does anyone know? The represent, someone who takes the place of someone, of the king or the the head while they're away. So, in the 12 deeds of all of the Buddhas who will come to this world system, one of the deeds is descent from Tushita heaven, where they are the reigning. They are the regent. They are teaching in Tushita heaven, one of the pure realms, not just the God realm Tushita. And when Shakyamuni actually left Tushita and descended to earth, to his mother's womb, he passed on the leadership, the crown, and so forth, the duty of teaching and being the regent of Tushita to Maitreya, who will be the next Buddha. So this is referring to that, to the regent of the conqueror, the protector Ajita. Ajita means unconquered, unconquerable. So that's one of the names, the epithets of Maitreya, because love, maybe you could say love can't be conquered. I pay homage with a mind of heartfelt respect. So first there was the prostration and respect to one's guru, who we try to see as inseparable with the Buddha, especially the Buddha of wisdom. Then to Shakyamuni, prostration, and then to Maitreya. Then next, you have been predicted by the Sugata himself, clarified the excellent systems of the profound and extensive, and are greatly renowned as the six trailblazers. As the great trailblazers. I prostrate to the 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes of Jambudvipa. I think it's Jambu, not Jambu. It almost looks like shampoo. Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa, you probably know that name. You probably say it every time there's a teaching, if you don't say it every day. Do you know how we say it in Tibetan? Dan, do you know? Jambudvipa? Do you know? Venerable? Jambudvipa, what? Zambuling, right? So in Tibetan, a lot of the the pronunciation of Sanskrit was such that like J is not pronounced like we believe that it's pronounced in Sanskrit today, like Ja. The Tibetans pronounce it like the Tibetan letter Za. So they're trying to say Zambu. They're trying to say Jambu. Dvipa means island or land. So it means the land of Jambu. And Tibetans say Zambu Ling. Ling is the same as island or region. So I prostrate to the 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes. The 2 supremes? No, that's too easy. I was just going to say Diana. I forgot the other. No, the 2 supremes. It's one of the only. I think in my life I only went to see some musical thing twice. Once I saw the Rolling Stones in Boston, and once my roommate, when I was in graduate school, got me to go off and see the Supremes at some place in New Jersey. So I remember this. Some place, some obscure place. Okay, so who is the Sugata? It says you have been predicted by the Sugata himself. It must be a guy because it says himself, right? Anyone? Shakyamuni. It's another name for the Buddha. Sugata is what? The Buddhi? The Buddhi. Give me the Buddhi. You have been predicted by the Sugata himself. Sugata would be translated as well gone. Sometimes people translate it as gone to bliss. In Tibetan we say Dewar Shekpa, but that's not a proper translation. Su, the prefix su in Sanskrit is a superlative. And gata, you know gata, like we say gate, gate, paragate. Gata is the past participle of to go, so well gone. You have been predicted by the he who has been well gone himself, that means the Buddha. You have clarified the excellent systems of the profound and the extensive. So here, this is related with the answer that Brish gave before, that when we talked about the two collections of merit and wisdom. In order to achieve the collection of merit, you need to practice extensive deeds. So when it says the extensive, this is talking about the Bodhisattva's activities, let's say, which are mainly talking about those activities which are conjoined with wisdom, but just talking about it from the point of view of the conventional level of reality, the extensive. When we talk about the extensive, we talk about the Bodhisattva's activities as were explained by Shantideva and the Bodhisattva Charyavatara, and all of the various activities of the Bodhisattvas that were explained in the Prajna Paramita Sutras, the sutras of the perfection of wisdom. The profound refers to wisdom, the practice of wisdom. So it's not, when we say the systems of the profound and the extensive, that's not exactly the same as merit and wisdom, but the profound refers to the practice of wisdom by which you collect the collection of wisdom or accumulate the collection of wisdom, and the extensive deeds or extensive behavior is the way in which you achieve the collection of merit. So this is prostrating to these great beings that had clarified the excellent systems. You are greatly renowned as the great trailblazers. So sometimes this is translated as the charioteers. Have you ever seen that in some of the texts, charioteers? So what's the sense of that? Why are some of these great beings called charioteers or trailblazers? Anyone know? They found the path of Dharma. Durji's turning the camera. I bet he's going to see himself. He can't quite get Evan in there because there's the mirror. You're going to see his nice ponytail when he turns it in that direction. Yeah, it's said that the Buddha himself set out all of these systems, but over time, very quickly, because even in the time of the Buddha, once the Buddha had passed away, it's as though the trail that had once been broken by the Buddha became overrun. Like in the old days, there might have been a road in the time the Romans built a road, but when it was not traveled continuously and not cleaned, it would get overrun by plants, and you wouldn't be able to see the way. So people who reopened those paths that were originally set down by the great armies of Rome were kind of here it doesn't mean trailblazers that open up something that wasn't open before. These are people who are some charioteers in the sense of those beings who were able to take their chariots over the areas that were not well known by others and find the right path. So those that found the intention of the Buddha I believe that's kind of the meaning of the etymology of that word. Greatly renowned as the great trailblazers, I prostrate to the 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes of Jambudvipa. Jambudvipa is what we refer to as the southern continent. Okay, sometimes referred to as this world system. So there's a whole, as Mark was saying in Abhidharma, there's a whole discussion about what that's meant. Maybe in Indian mythology it means, Jambudvipa meant India itself. Who are the 6 ornaments? Well, it says right here at the bottom of the page in the first note. The ornaments of the middle way are Nargarjuna and Aryadeva, who was his disciple. There are the ornaments of Abhidharma. We mentioned before that the 2 brothers, Asanga and Vasubandhu. And the ornaments of valid cognition, or pramana. Those of you who did the last course when we studied a lot about valid cognition, Dignaga and Dharmakirti. Dignaga was the elder, and his disciple, via, I think, a generation separated, was Dharmakirti. They wrote the great texts on logic and valid cognition. So those are called the 6 ornaments. So sometimes you'll sometimes find tankas of these beings in monasteries or dharma centers. One way you'll be able to tell that you'll count and say, well, there's 6. Maybe that's the 6 ornaments. And often some of them are debating posture, like there's Aryadeva and so forth, because they were, and Dignaga and Dharmakirti were known especially for their ability at logic and so forth. So these would be beings that would be especially revered by scholars, those who are not just scholars in the sense of, as opposed to practitioners, but beings who really understand the meaning of the scriptures, because these are the beings that re-clarified what Lord Buddha had meant. They explained what was meant by the sutras themselves. Okay? So they're called the 6 ornaments of the southern continent. And the 2 supremes, as we said, it's not Diana Ross, are the 2 acharyas, that is scholars, Shakyaprabha and Gunaprabha, who had written texts on discipline or the Vinaya. When we study in the monasteries, there are 5 great texts that are studied, and one of them is on the Vinaya, and they study something called the Vinaya Sutra, which was not an actual sutra taught by Buddha, but it has that name. And I think that was written by Gunaprabha, and Shakyaprabha wrote some other texts. So these essentially are talking about the beings that explained the great text. So there's the ornaments of the middle way, the Majjhimika, the ornaments of the Abhidharma, the ornaments of Pramana, and the ornaments of Vinaya. So there's 4 kinds of sets there. What's the 5th text, the 5th kind of subject that's studied? Those are the kind of main subjects that are studied in the monasteries. The Majjhimika philosophy, the middle way, the Abhidharma, once one becomes very learned, the Vinaya, and then all the way through the education, studying the texts on valid cognition by Dignaga and Dharmakirti. What's the 5th great text that are studied, 5th great subject, There's said to be 5 great subjects in the monasteries. Anyone know? Medicine. It's the texts on the perfection of wisdom, the Prajnaparamita. So that's usually what they begin with. There would be some preliminary courses that would include material like we studied before, Lorik and Drupta that we'll be studying on Monday, tenets. And then they would go into studying the Prajnaparamita that mainly talked about the extensive deeds of the Bodhisattvas, the Prajnaparamita literature. And in a hidden way, it was talking about emptiness. And when they study the Prajnaparamita, they're learning about emptiness, but from some of the lower schools' point of view. Then secondly, they would study Madhyamaka, the middle way school, the correct view of emptiness that was expounded by Nagarjuna and Aryadeva, especially by Chandrakirti and Shantideva. And then they would study, once they'd finish those, it'd be many years of study. All along they would be studying, and all this time they would be studying the texts on valid cognition every year. Then when they were in the Geshe class, they would study Abhidharma, which was especially talking about the lower Abhidharma, and the Vinaya, which is talking about the rules of discipline that Buddha taught. So there are 5 subjects, one of which they studied all along, the text on valid cognition. They'd start with the perfection of wisdom, and they'd study the Majjhimika, then they'd study Abhidharma and Vinaya together. And then they would review everything from many years, sometimes decades in the golden years of Tibet. So I prostrate to the 6 ornaments and the 2 supremes of the southern continent, Jambudvipa. In this land surrounded by snow mountains, what does that mean? Tibet. Okay, I thought you were going to say Colorado. You caused the grove of the 1,000-petaled lotuses of the sutras, tantras, and their commentaries to bloom anew, and are worthy of praise equal to the sun. To the conqueror, I bow down to the Lama protector Manjughosha. So you must know who this is praise to, those of you who've studied a little bit. This is a praise to Lama Tsongkhapa, who was Tibetan, of course, in this land surrounded by snow mountains. There's a prayer that we say when we dedicate merit, often a prayer for the long life of His Holiness the Dalai Lama. Kangri Rawe, Kowe Shinkam Dir, in this land surrounded by snowy mountains. So that's one of the epithets of Tibet, the land of snow mountains, the land of snow. In fact, when I was in Mongolia, I might have mentioned this to you before, I don't know if you've ever seen the katas, you know, the ritual scarves, like this, in Tibet are usually white. In Mongolia, they're blue. And I asked someone, what's the reason? Because almost all of them, I mean, you can get white ones too, but mainly they're blue, very beautiful. And they said, although Tibet is called the land of snows, Mongolia is known as the land of the sky blue, of the blue sky. It's kind of interesting, very beautiful sky indeed. Also snow in Mongolia too. Yeah. So Lama Tsongkhapa, the founder of the Glukapa tradition, really was, if you have a chance to study his teachings, absolutely astounding scholar and practitioner. Really, when you start to read about his life and you read his texts and you have a chance to study other things, develop incredible faith. This was really an emanation of an enlightened being. He revivified and the study of the sutras and the tantras and their commentaries, and clarified many, many points that other people had misunderstood. So this is a praise to him. And then, merely by seeing the light rays of your exalted activities, the eye of awareness seeing the excellent path is illuminated. May the Venerable Guru, the light of the Daymaker, which is an epithet of the sun, always abide at the lotus stamens of my heart. So again, a entreaty to the Guru, who we try to see in some way as, our conduit to the enlightened mind. And then finally, his a stanza of promising to compose the text along with his own sense of humility, although others will not benefit from a discourse by one such as me, for the sake of enhancing my mind's familiarity with the excellent explanations, and due to having been exhorted by others, I shall write a little on the modes of minds and mental factors in accordance with the texts on knowledge, which means Abhidharma. So it's said that this is traditional at the beginning of texts, besides trying to create conditions to be able to complete the text successfully, that by praising and prostrating to one's gurus and so forth and holy beings, one also tries to make a firm determination that you're going to do that. So maybe it would be worthwhile for us to try to make a firm determination, I'm going to study this course. I'm going to finish this course. So it'd be very good. So why don't we take a little break? And there's some hot water and tea, and you can fire up. And we'll start maybe 7-8 minutes, something like that, 10 minutes. So let's continue a little bit further and through the preliminaries here. So here's going to begin to talk a little bit about the rationale for why to study this particular subject. I'll wait till Venerable's finished with her thing. Okay, you good? Okay. Basically, understanding the nature of our mind and the mental factors is incredibly useful, because at the beginning of our practice, one of the main things that we have to do is to try to control our mind, to get in control of what's happening. Right now, we don't have control over our mind. Our the various factors of our mind, usually negative factors for the most part, arise and they control us. And in order to get control, you have to begin to first identify, to recognize what's happening. So the very first step is to understand the defining characteristics of these various states of mind. I think this, for my own practice, from my own point of view, this kind of strategy is very, very useful. First of all, you have to recognize, let's say, the things to be eliminated and the things to be enhanced. You have to have defining characteristics, and you have to investigate that and see if that makes sense. That what the Buddha called negative states of mind are indeed harmful, that they cause us harm and they cause harm for others. And in time, one can begin to understand the deeper implications of that they create negative karma. We can't see that states of mind create negative karma right now. We can only kind of surmise that from the teachings of Buddha. But we can begin to recognize, and that's what this kind of text is very useful for, because it gives the defining characteristics and the divisions, all the various varieties of these mental factors. First, you have to identify and recognize what the states are, both positive and negative. Let's take the negative states first of all. Then you have to recognize their shortcomings. Once you have identified them, you have to say, okay, there's anger in the mind. Then you have to, over a period of time, which through your own experience, through the teachings of Buddha and through your own experience, again and again contemplating that, you have to recognize strongly, develop a strong conviction that these states of mind that you've recognized as negative states of mind, let's say delusions, are harmful, that they're actually your enemies. At first, you might say, oh yeah, I've got a lot of desire. But that's good. What the heck? Go for it. Or, man, am I angry? But he needs it. That other person, I have to vent my anger, and they deserve it. Do you follow what I mean? At first, we might recognize that, even if we had identified the delusions, we might not see their shortcomings. So first, after recognizing them, identifying them, the second step is to become convinced, in the case of the negative states of mind, of their shortcomings. Then when you're convinced, well, it's a little bit like, say, someone who's trying to give up addictive behavior. If you're addicted to cigarettes or alcohol or something, even if you recognize, a lot of times people don't even recognize it's a problem, right? When people talk about going through the various kinds of therapies to overcome addictive behavior, sometimes it had to be sort of pointed out to them very clearly that this is a certain kind of behavior. They had to recognize what they were doing, that the alcohol had a particular effect, and they had to, in order to give it up, one of the most crucial things is to really become convinced that this is destroying you and your loved ones and so forth. without that step, without recognizing the defects of something, very difficult to give up any kind of addictive behavior. Anyone here know what I'm talking about? That's that kind of thing. You have to really become convinced of that, see the defects, then the third step is investigate what solutions there are, what the antidotes to those negative states of mind are. Okay, this is then where you would start to apply meditation to try to eradicate them. It's right at the beginning, just to sit down with some book that say how to get rid of anger. You just try to do some meditation. You're not going to have the energy to do that at first until you've first of all recognized what anger is in your own mind. It's not just being when you feel uncomfortable. That's not anger. It's not being unhappy. That's not anger. Although we might not, at first we might not be able to recognize what exactly defines anger. You have to recognize it, then to identify and to become convinced of its shortcomings, of its defects. Then you are motivated from your own side to apply the antidotes. The antidotes, let's say for instance, the antidotes to anger. There are what we might call temporal antidotes and ultimate antidotes. Temporal antidotes in the sense that if that particular antidote is being cultivated in your mind, anger would not be able to be present at that time. But simply having cultivated the temporal antidotes, what's the temporal antidote to anger? Well, love, for instance. Love, if you get angry at people, not just at the sky or your computer, Microsoft Word or whatever you're angry at, but if you're actually getting angry at people, if you were to instead cultivate a sense of loving kindness, wanting them to be happy, that itself would preclude anger from being generated in your mind. That's kind of a temporal antidote. There are many other kinds of temporal antidotes too. Many of the teachings that Buddha gave in his many years of teaching were the various antidotes to the 84,000 delusions. Have you heard that expression? 84,000 delusions? Evan, have you heard that before? Okay. The first is, I think I mentioned this before. When I studied with Geshe Darge in India at the Library of Tibetan Works and Archives many years ago, I think he started one lecture with saying there are 84,000 delusions. The first is ignorance, and he gave some defining characteristics of that. And then second was attachment, and the third was anger. And then he went on to say that all the rest of the 84,000 could be included in those three. And there was an audible sigh in the room, as though people were getting out their pencils. 84,000, okay, this is going to be a while. So it said in the sutras many times, it said that the Buddha gave 84,000 teachings to counteract the 84,000 kinds of delusions. And in general, they're talking about many kinds of temporal antidotes. But the ultimate antidote to all of the delusions, there's one antidote that serves to eradicate all of them in an ultimate way so that they'll never come back again in the future. And that is the realization of emptiness, selflessness and emptiness. That's the wisdom side. The method side of our practice involves, one of the practices is eliminating the negative states and cultivating the positive states. Collecting merit, in other words, trying to avoid creating demerit or negative karma and creating positive karma, collecting merit, meritorious activities that become the support of our wisdom that can realize the ultimate truth, and also provide the cooperative conditions from life to life for our prosperity, for our happiness, our comfort, so that we don't find adverse conditions to the path. It's very important to have that kind of method side, not only to have wisdom. So the ultimate antidote of all of the delusions is the wisdom of emptiness. But in order to get to that point where you can realize emptiness, you need to have the temporal antidotes cultivated from time to time. Because, say for instance, if you just put all of your energy in trying to recognize emptiness and thinking that that's the ultimate cure, right? Do you follow what I'm saying, Mark? Just if you put all your energy into just that, there would be many other kinds of obstacles in your mind that are preventing you from realizing emptiness, your own attachment and so forth. Emptiness is not something that can be captured and understood very quickly at the beginning. I've given this example before, but I find for my own mind it's very makes a lot of sense. Say, for instance, we were trying to clean out a space to grow beautiful plants that's now overrun. It's got a lot of rocks and old plants, poisonous plants that are growing there. And I were to go in with a machete and try to cut down the plants, and Marcy and Chris would be saying, "Well, George, look it. Basically, you've got to get down to the roots. You've got to get them out from the roots, because what if I just cut them off with a machete?" And I after a couple hours of work, I say, "Oh, look, it's all clear. We can plant our medicinal plants and our fruit trees here." As soon as the first rain comes, a couple days later, the sun shines, all of the roots that were still left there, the seeds and so forth, are going to start to grow again, right, of these things that were obstructing the field. So eventually you have to get out and extricate them from the root, take them out from the root. That's like realizing emptiness, so that all of the delusions will never arise again. That kind of wisdom, that state of mind in which there's no field for the delusions to arise, comes about through wisdom. But in order to do that, in order to get into the field, our fields are completely, sky high with vines and thorns and everything. In order to get there and get into the roots, you've got to start to chop down, use the temporal antidotes like the machete, get in there and temporarily subdue the anger and the jealousy and the laziness, the attachment, the pride, the depression. You've got to temporarily reduce them with these temporal antidotes to provide the conditions to dig in and get them from the root. Does that make sense? Okay, so that's kind of one of the strategies, one of the reasons for understanding all of Buddha's teachings. All of it was aimed to eventually create the right conditions for us to understand emptiness, so that we could liberate ourselves, so that we would have the state of mind to develop the courage to work for others, to have the ability to do that. So if we think of it as something that we're going to be learning in this course, how to identify, most of our work will be in identifying the delusions and the positive states of mind and those that are neutral, and then recognizing the benefits or the needs of them, of the positive ones, and recognizing the defects of the negative ones, and then developing the resolution to cultivate that which is positive and to eliminate, through their antidotes, both temporal and ultimate, the negative states of mind. So let's see what Yeshe Gelsen, how he presents this. He's using the same kind of idea. Intelligent beings, which is one of the kind of epithets for the bodhisattvas in general, but here it could mean intelligent beings in general, who have in mind their welfare in future lives, who take to mind not being content simply with acquiring food and clothing for the duration of this life. And this is mainly what most people, not just food and clothing, what are the things people are most concerned with in the world? In societies in the past, it would have been food and clothing just to get by, right, in the depression. But then when you've got food and clothing, what comes next? Power, money, pleasure, leisure. What is it? Fame. Yeah, being famous, being rich, being powerful. What is it? Being liked, being popular. The 8 worldly dharmas, all of them are included. Those seem very attractive to us, aren't they? To have friends, to be loved, to be in a position of leisure, to have comfort. What more could you want? To be powerful, to be well, or maybe even for some people, depending on their society, to be feared. Right? Maybe there's some imprints from having been animals in past lives and knowing that the only way to survive is if you're feared. But these are not, from a spiritual point of view, these are not ways that can actually help us in the future. At most, if we have the karma from past lives, by acting in these ways, seeking out these things, we might be able to find some short-lived situation right now where we have a little bit of comfort, but we're using up our virtuous karma, and in so doing, creating negative karma for the future. So intelligent beings who have in mind their welfare in future lives, not just being content with simply acquiring food and clothing for the duration of this life alone, by thinking, what will become of me in future rebirths? This is sort of the motivating factor. They should wonder, they should think in this way. I've circled without, my own independence, powerlessly, in the three realms of cyclic existence since beginningless time. The three realms? Okay, I was just going to check if you know. Okay. I thought maybe it was three realms. Asia, Europe, and the Americas. No, it means the form, the formless, the form realm, and the desire realm. Where are we right now? Which realm are we in? The form realm. Someone said the form realm. No, come on, I thought you could. I have circled powerlessly in the three realms of cyclic existence since beginningless time, continuously experiencing suffering. So this kind of thinking is, although it might sound kind of depressing, these are kind of the subjects when people study the stages of the path, the things that they don't want to go to is listening about the hell realms or the suffering. They just want the good part, right? So, but what really motivates you is to being able to recognize our state right now and what we've experienced in the past and what we'll continue to experience in the future. Then the question arises, what's the root of this continuous suffering, cycling, and cyclic existence? Having contemplated in this manner, you must come to understand that these sufferings of cyclic existence neither arise causelessly, without any cause, nor do they arise from discordant causes, unrelated causes. Rather, they arise from their own causes, actions and afflictions, the famous karma and klesha, right? Do you know what action and afflictions mean? When one of the basic teachings of the Buddha was, the very first teaching that he gave, the first turning of the wheel, was the teaching on the Four Noble Truths, right? What are the Four Noble Truths? Let's see. Wendy, do you know the Four Noble Truths? Okay. No, you should. Where's your family Buddhist in Korea? Okay, so you're forgiven. Okay. I thought if you're a Buddhist, you should know the Four Noble Truths. You're probably maybe our only native-born possibility, but you weren't Buddhist. Okay. Oh no, Venerable. What are the Four Noble Truths?
Me?
Yes. Yeah.
True suffering.
Truth is suffering, or true suffering.
Yeah. And cause of suffering.
Yeah. The origin, the true origin of suffering. Yeah. Huh?
And the past.
That's the fourth one. Yeah.
The cessation of.
Yeah. The true cessation of suffering, and the true path that leads to the cessation of suffering. So, when you talk, you've heard of that before now, right? When I remind you. Okay. So what is the origin or cause of suffering? Well, you hear in the Theravada tradition, you'll hear the cause is craving or thirst, tanha. The Buddha did talk in some of the scriptures that was what caused us to grasp on at the time of death, craving. In more comprehensive teachings, if you check in both both the Hinayana and the Mahayana Abhidharma is much more explicit. It said the immediate cause of all of our suffering is, first of all, karma that we created in past lives. You know what karma means, right? Catherine, do you know the word karma? You don't know? No. Karma actually is Indian word, Sanskrit word that means action. So we create actions. We've created actions in the past, some of them skillful in the sense that they were done without expectation, out of care for others or out of selflessness, and they have repercussions that bring pleasure or relief to us in the future, say now. Other actions we've done in the past were done unskillfully out of anger, attachment, ego in some way, pride, jealousy, miserliness, laziness. And they have repercussions as suffering. So the main way that our negative karma ripens upon us is in the feeling that we experience, the mental factor feeling, negative, unpleasant feelings. So, if we talk about what's the cause of suffering, the immediate cause is the negative karma that we've created. But if you look more deeply, what's the cause of that karma? And someone had mentioned, maybe the Venerable's over here, essentially all of the afflictions that are called klesha. You know this word, afflictions or delusions? Some of the root delusions and the 20 secondary delusions are part of the 51 mental factors. When we talk about the cause of suffering or the origin of suffering, there's two things that Buddha said, karma and klesha. Karma means actions, negative karma, and, well, even contaminated virtue also is the nature of suffering anyway, but we'll talk about that later. And what's the cause of those negative actions? The afflictions, the klesha, the unsubdued mind, the disturbed mind, anger, attachment, and so forth, jealousy, miserliness, laziness. And if you went deeply, as I heard people, as we've heard many times, even the root of the afflictions, if you look amongst those, the root of all of them is one particular kind of ignorance that grasps to an ego identity and grasps to a self of phenomena. So, what is the cause of this? Having contemplated in this manner, you must come to understand these sufferings of cyclic existence neither arise without cause, nor arise from discordant cause. Rather, they arise from their own causes, actions and afflictions. Actions is how you translate karma, and afflictions is how you translate klesha. The protector Nargajuna. Here it doesn't mean like, when it says protector, it doesn't mean like some kind of protecting deity. It's just a way of translating a particular title that kind of means the Lord or the one who looks after us. Nargajuna was one of the great Mahayana saints. He said in his text, The Precious Garland, as long as there is grasping to the aggregates, here Ziggy has translated it as misconceived, because I think she's taken the translation from some other people's translation. In the Tibetan, it actually, we talk about grasping, self-grasping, grasping to phenomena. Grasping here kind of has the sense of misconceiving, but it means grasping to a true identity. So as long as one grasps, as long as there is grasping to the aggregates, that means grasping to them as true, or you could say misconceiving them. For that long, there will be the grasping to the I, a grasping to an I, a self-existent self. When there is this grasping to an I, there is also the creation of karma. And due to that, there is rebirth. So this stanza is very famous and kind of encapsulates, the 12 links of dependent arising and the Four Noble Truths, at least on the negative side, the cause of the problem. Remember we said that our suffering comes about from actions. Actions are created by klesha, or afflictions, and the root of that is grasping to the self. The root of that, in a sense, is grasping to all phenomena, such as one's own body, the aggregates. So that's why he says, as long as the aggregates are grasped to, as long as there is grasping to the aggregates or misconceiving of the aggregates as truly existent, as long as you have that, you haven't realized emptiness. You're not going to be able to eliminate the grasping to the self. So that's what the core of the ultimate kind of solution is, to get rid of all of our suffering in terms of the ultimate antidote, to realize emptiness. And in another text that Nagarjuna wrote, treatise on the middle way, sometimes called Fundamental Wisdom, he said, the root of cyclic existence is, here he says, she translates, compositional actions. It's this word samskara, which link is this in the 12 links, do you know? The first link is what in the 12 links? Ignorance. This is the second link. This is right after ignorance. Because of ignorance, we create actions, or here we compose. The word is actually, there is composition. You could almost put in parentheses the word actions. Duce means composition. That means we create karma. Therefore, the wise do not create or do not compose. Maybe you could say that means they don't create karma. Hence, the unwise are agents or creators. The wise are not. Why is that? Why are the wise not creators? Why are they not agents of karma? Because of seeing the ultimate nature of reality, which the Buddha called thusness or suchness. That's one of the names that's used for the ultimate nature of reality. So this is the ultimate antidote to all of our problems. If we could realize emptiness, we could prevent creating karma, negative karma, and contaminated virtue. And we could escape from cyclic existence. If we had the motivation to attain enlightenment, we could actually attain enlightenment. Remember, there were, what did it talk about? 6 ornaments. The 2 ornaments of the Madhyamaka were Nagarjuna and his main disciple Aryadeva. So then it gives a quote from Acharya Aryadeva in his 400 stanzas. It is a very nice translation of this text if you like to study this. He said, the consciousness that is the seed of cyclic existence, or maybe you could say consciousness is the seed of cyclic existence. Its objects are its sphere. Here's his objects of activity. Chuyul is interesting. I probably won't be able to remember the Sanskrit now, but the word for sphere of activity comes from a Sanskrit word that has to do with the word for cow. Does anyone know what I'm talking about? A cow had a certain field or sphere that it could, eat the grass in, right? So the word for in Sanskrit for sphere of activity or sphere has to do with something as simple as the word for cow, the root of the word for cow. Chandrakirti, another acharya, another scholar, says in his Madhyamaka the very diverse worlds of sentient beings, their environments are established by the mind itself. It is taught that all migrating beings, without exception, are born from actions. So these last 2 statements about consciousness being the seed, in Aryadeva's quote, that's talking about, that's the fundamental, all the world and the environment and everything comes about because of our mind's activity, unskillful activities. That's what Aryadeva means by the seed of cyclic existence. It doesn't mean that good mind is the seed of cyclic existence. It means the seed of cyclic existence is the activity, the unskillful activity of the consciousness. And consciousness has as its sphere the belief in truly existent objects. Chandrakirti is saying also that all of the world and the environment and everything comes about from the mind, and everything, all migrating beings without exception are born from karma. And then a very famous quote from Vasubandhu, one of the other ornaments. Remember, he wrote the Hinayana Abhidharma. He wrote in his Abhidharma Kosha, the various worlds are produced from karma, or actions, here it says. So all the worlds, and you might say, well, excuse me, George, we know very well the worlds come about from gravitational attraction and nuclear reactions and so forth, right? It's not like from karma suddenly the world appears. It sounds almost, if you didn't understand, you might think that that was some kind of backward, unscientific way of looking at it, right? But even the Buddhism actually understands and has postulated and accepted the evolution of universes from the time of the Buddha. It's not something that when we talk about the universe comes about from karma, it's not as like suddenly because of karma suddenly pop, something happens. But things evolve because of karma. And in the Abhidharma Kosha and another stanza, it says, the root of existence is the 6 subtle increasers. So that's another name for the 6 root delusions that we'll talk about later. So when we talk about the afflictions, the 6 root afflictions, they're sometimes called the subtle increasers. Many such statements have been taught. So what's Yeshe Gelsen, what's his approach here in his, after having promised to write the text, he's saying that anyone with any mind, anyone who's intelligent, wouldn't be content with just the happiness of this lifetime, food and clothing and other things that we might be thinking of now, but they would begin to think of what's going to happen in the future and recognize that since beginningless time, we've not had independence. We are not independent. We are under the power of our delusions and karma and delusion, karma and afflictions, karma and klesha. Even when our mind is controlled, our old karma ripens. Even if our karma is not ripening, we create, because of our afflictions, more problems, right? It's two-pronged, our karma and our afflictions. Just purifying karma is not enough. You could do 1,000,000 Vajrasattva retreats, purify all your negative karma, and as soon as you got out, you could get angry in 1 second or attached in 1 second. Oh, I've been in retreat so long, look at those dakinis, or, look at those dakas, or whatever, or get angry in 1 second. So purifying is not, from a Buddhist perspective, is not the way to get to ultimate, is not the ultimate solution to liberation. Simply exhausting one's negative karma. But it is helpful if one can do that. So what he's been talking about here is that all of the great scholars that he's paid reverence to before have noted that the root of the problem is our mind and how the mind acts, the delusions within the mind. And of those, the root of all of those is kind of a certain kind of ignorance that conceives of a self-identity that right now each and every one of us is accepting and acceding to. We believe that, We believe there's a real self back there, a real operator. Sounds like some nice line from some Motown song. Operator. There's some words, I think, that had the right number of syllables, that probably could work in a lot of different lines. What do you think, Chris? Operator. Yeah, this is it. Yeah. There's a sense of an operator, a taster, a creator, a controller back behind the body and mind. And that's not the only problem. We also, in the Theravada and the Hinayana tradition, that's mainly what is emphasized, that if you could understand the non-existence of that self, that seems to be there, the emptiness of that, the selflessness, that you could find liberation. But the Buddha taught in the Mahayana Sutras, as Nagarjuna mentioned in one of these stanzas here, it's not enough to eliminate the grasping to the I, as long as you're still conceiving or grasping to outer phenomena, such as your own aggregates or other outer phenomena, as truly existent. You haven't a chance of eliminating the real subtle self-grasping. So this is what all of these stanzas are getting at. We're studying mind and mental factors to be able to understand the mind, to be able to control it, and to first apply the temporal antidotes and eventually get to the point where we can apply the ultimate antidote. Shantideva's Bodhisattvacharya Vatara, famous text engaging in the Bodhisattva's deeds, sometimes called I like to call the spiritual commando guide. I mean, Bodhisattva is basically a spiritual commando, right? And you can imagine, these black kelvar jackets and everything like that. The propounder of truth has taught. This means the Buddha, the teacher of reality. We can call Yangdak Sumba Nigi Ten. The teacher of reality has taught that in this way, all fears and the immeasurable sufferings, arise from the mind, are arisen from the mind. So everything that we experience is not as like, oh, so-and-so messed me up, Or what do kids always say? Oh, he made me angry, Mommy. That makes me angry. Or, do you ever say that something? You make me angry? Or that something me off? That annoys me? As though it has the power from its own side to do something, right? Actually, the mind itself creates your problems. The outer environment doesn't have the power to do those things. Shantideva also says, those who do not understand the secret of the mind, the essential point, the objective of the Dharma, they wander aimlessly, even though they wish to attain happiness. And destroy suffering, they wander aimlessly if they don't understand what the secret of the mind is. The mind being the creator of all our happiness and suffering. Therefore, I should hold well and guard well this mind of mine. Oh, this cute. Further, he said, Shantideva, physical suffering, mental unhappiness, the various kinds of fear as well as separation from what one desires arise from committing misdeeds. Whatever physical suffering you have, when you're sick, when you feel pain, headaches, mental unhappiness, which is different. Would you call a headache mental unhappiness?
Seems physical.
What do you think? What do you think? Michelle, what do you think? Is headache mental unhappiness?
I think it depends on the headache. Sometimes I think it's mental, sometimes I think it's physical.
That's right. I'll go with that. You say, man, this is a headache. That's mental unhappiness, right? But you say, oh, I've got a headache. That's probably physical, right? But here, all of the different sufferings that we have come about because of our negative karma. It's not just other people's fault or the pollution in the air and so forth. Physical suffering, mental unhappiness, the various kinds of fear, as well as separating from that which one desires. This is one of the 6 kinds of suffering one finds in the great exposition of the path, right? Separating, meeting what's undesirable, separating from what one desires. All of these kinds of various undesirable states arise from committing misdeeds. By performing virtues intended in the mind, wherever I go, due to those merits, I shall be honored with the excellences that are their results, the good qualities. So if you want to be happy, you have to create the causes of it. Although one who commits misdeeds wishes for happiness, wherever he or she goes, those misdeeds will completely destroy him or her with the weapon of suffering, the weapons of suffering. It's like the example I remember mentioning it. I collected, when I was in graduate school, a great number of parking tickets in Philadelphia. I never paid. And it's not this way with karma that you kind of say, okay, what's it called after a certain number of years, you're not, status of limitation? Statute of limitations? Not the statute, right? Statute of limitations. It's not as though, when I was a kid or when I was young, I was a real rake or something like this, and I created these things, but now it's gone, it's forgotten, Actually, the actions that we create do have a result, no matter what happens. They're not forgotten. As a result of virtue, the spiritual children of the Sugatas come to dwell in the hearts of vast, fragrant, and cool lotuses. This is talking about being reborn in the Pure Lands. The nourishment of the conqueror's pleasant speech causes their splendor to increase. Their supreme bodies emerge from lotuses that unfold due to the light of the munis, the sages, the Buddhas. They abide in the presence of the conquerors as a result of virtue. How is one born in the Pure Lands? By creating virtuous karma. As a result of many non-virtues, my conditions will be wretched. Do my skin... Something's wrong. My skin being ripped off by the henchmen of Yama, molten copper melted by tremendous heat will be poured into my body. Pierced by flaming swords and daggers, my flesh will be cut into hundreds of pieces, and I shall plummet upon the fiercely blazing iron ground. Sounds uncomfortable. This is the result of our non-virtue, right? Negative karma. So just as has been said above, all of cyclic existence, the environment that we encounter, what we see, and its inhabitants, the beings therein, arise through the force of their own causes, actions and afflictions, karma and klesha. This is a good thing to know. This has been taught not just once. It's not like the Buddha just sort of alluded to this and it's like some esoteric point that is not understood well, but it was said again and again in the sutras and tantras as well as their commentaries. Likewise, it has been taught that all excellent qualities of the paths and grounds of the three vehicles, some of us just studied the paths and grounds of secret mantra out in Vajrapani, right? The paths and grounds of the three vehicles. What are the three vehicles? SUVs? No. Motorcycle. Elephants, horses, and donkeys? No. What are the three vehicles? Hinayana, Theravada, Mahayana. Okay, now come on. It's actually not Theravada, but in one of the Hinayana schools is called Theravada. Those of you who will have a chance to study the tenets. Here, usually in the Buddhist scriptures himself, the Buddha referred to three vehicles: the vehicle of the hearers, the Shravaka Yana, one of the Hinayana practitioners, the Pratyeka Buddha Yana, the self-realizers, and or what were they called? I forgot. Solitary realizers, also Hinayana Arhats, and the Bodhisattva Yana, Bodhisattva vehicle. So those are called the three vehicles. Sometimes you see it says the Hinayana, the Mahayana, and the Vajrayana, but in general, that's not accepted by the scholars as the three vehicles, because the Tantra, Vajrayana, is actually part of the Mahayana. Okay? So it's been taught by all the sutras, the tantras, as well as their commentaries. Likewise, it has been taught that all the excellent qualities of the paths and grounds of the three vehicles, the resultant Buddha fields, exalted bodies, lifespans, deeds, as well as exalted activities, of the Bodhisattvas and Buddhas, arise solely from their own causes, wholesome, virtuous minds. Therefore, the root of all cyclic existence and nirvana is established to be the mind itself. What does it mean the root of everything good and bad is the mind? I thought the root of everything bad was the mind. The root of everything good is the mind also. If you use the mind in a skillful way, you create the causes for all of these great pleasures and abilities to help others. If you use the mind in an unskillful way, you create your own ruin. Hence, it is of utmost importance to understand the modes of minds and mental factors, the manner in which those things function. Thus, here I shall compose a brief presentation, only 92 pages, okay? This is great scholars when they say a brief presentation, it could be much longer, on minds and mental factors. This has two parts: the individual entities and divisions of minds and mental factors, and at the very end of the text you might want to look at a summary of the salient points in their application to practice. So the main part of the text is this first thing, the individual entities. The word entity sometimes also has the meaning of definition. So it means the individual definitions. When the entity of something means like, what is its defining characteristic? The individual definitions and divisions of minds and mental factors, that's the main part of the text. And that itself, as on the bottom of page 10, it says, that has two subdivisions: the explanations of minds and the explanations of mental factors. So what's the difference, before we actually just read what Yeshe Gelsen said? Some of you who have studied before probably have an idea. Amanda, do you know the difference between what is meant by mind and mental factor? No, I don't want to get... No, yeah, go for it.
I'm thinking mind in its nature would be clear and pure, and the factors are maybe patterns within that sphere.
Mm-hmm. Very creative. Mm-hmm. 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 Does anyone have a... Somehow, I remember my teacher, Lama Yeshe, sometimes when people would be... they wanted to decide how to practice the Dharma by popular decree, like our society, we'll vote on it. We'll vote on what the definitions of minds and mental factors should be just about. The Lama used to say, Dharma is not a democracy. Sort of as the Buddha explained how things are. It's not so much open to sort of one's own kind of creative impulses. Where creativity comes in, I think, in the Bodhisattva path, is being able to explain that which you've experienced through the teachings of Buddha in new ways that are applicable to people of different levels and in different ways. But it's not so much like creating something new about the Dharma. Here, my understanding, the word mind here is a Tibetan word sem, like we would write in English S-E-M. And the word for mental factor is, maybe we don't have to translate it mental factor, is sem-jung, or sem-lei-jungwa. It means that which is arisen from the mind. Mind and that which is arisen from the mind. Mind here refers to the fundamental nature of any of our 6 consciousnesses. We have 6 consciousnesses, right? Let's count them. Let's see, the 2 eyes. There's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. That's it, right? Oh, wait, left off the tongue. No, eye consciousness is counted as 1, right? Ear consciousness, nose consciousness, taste consciousness, tactile consciousness that pervades our body. That's 5. What's the 6th consciousness? Mental consciousness, right? We'll have to send a letter to Bruce Willis about that. Did you see that movie? What was it? The Sixth Sense or something like that? Mm-hmm. As though there's something mysterious. He has a 6th sense. I mean, come on, we all have a 6th sense, right? If we didn't have a 6th sense, we wouldn't exist. Mental consciousness is our 6th sense. So all of those consciousnesses have a particular common quality of being clear and knowing the mere entity, the mere nature of their perceptual field, like eyesight, eye consciousness, primary consciousness, when we just talk about mind, the eye consciousness, or we could call it primary mind, primary consciousness, has its main ability is just to know the basic perceptual field, just shape and color. Mental factors, or that which arises within, like the ocean of the mind, like the mind is like a big ocean, and all of the deformations, all of the changes within it, its particularities are like the mental factors, like the waves upon the ocean would be the mental factors. In this case, the mental factors would be that which those factors of that same mind, that same consciousness, it's not a different entity, the mental factors from the I, mind and mental factors are not different entities from one another, like you could separate them. They're like the water and the waves, right? The mental factors engage the particularities of the perceptual field, whereas the main mind is defined in such a way that defining mind itself as just knowing the perceptual field, whereas the mental factors are those parts of the mind that have particular functions, that have particular qualities or differences. Does that make sense? Like feeling is a quality of mind. It is what's called a mental factor. Okay, or you don't have to call it mental factor, you can call it secondary mind, that which arises from the mind. So there are primary minds. Mind essentially here means primary mind. When we talk about you've heard the 5 aggregates, right? Have you heard the 5 aggregates? What are the 5 aggregates? Or the 5 skandhas, pancha skandha? No? No? I need one of those horns.
A gong.
A gong, okay. I'll give you a hint. Form. The form skandha, form aggregate. No, formlessness. Good try. Form. What would come next? Feeling. Discrimination. Compositional factors, and consciousness. Those are called the 5 skandhas. The Buddha said that every being is like if you took apart a car. You could put the various parts of the car in different piles. You could put all of the metal and all the steel in one pile, all the aluminum in one pile, all the plastic in one pile, all the glass in one pile, all the petroleum in one pile. You'd end up with a bunch of piles or aggregates. And after you took everything apart, there was nothing left, right? The same thing with the person. You might say, well, you could divide the person into bones, blood, flesh, phlegm, I don't know, all these different kinds of medical things. But the Buddha didn't divide up that way. He said you could divide the person up basically into 2 parts, body and mind. So one of them is called the form aggregate. That means our body and all the parts of it. And then the mind has 4 parts: feelings, discriminations, compositional factors, and consciousness. So the consciousness aggregate, that 5th one, is actually talking about mind, is talking about here what is called mind just means primary mind. Okay? So let's see, we'll just read a little bit because we're almost near the end of the class. We're just for auspiciousness for next class to start this discussion in the actual real gist of the class. And maybe if you have a chance to reread what we've done today and to read the next 4, 5, 6 pages so that you're familiar with this. And maybe if you have questions, circle it, put a little note in your text, and pay attention as we go along. If I'm not able to answer your questions as we go along, feel free to ask questions. So here the text begins, the explanation of mind. So this is talking about between the 2 things, mind and mental factors. Regarding the difference between a mind, and it gives a note here, note in this context, main mind, soosem, and mind and primary consciousness are mutually inclusive and synonymous. Does that make sense? Mutually inclusive means that they're sort of synonymous, right? They mean one and the same thing. Thus, the translation term consciousness would encompass both main minds as well as mental factors. So here it says, regarding the difference between a mind and a mental factor, the text by Maitreya that Asanga brought down from Tushita Heaven, one of the texts, 5 texts called the Madhyanta Vibhangna, discrimination of the middle and extremes. In other words, delineating what is the middle way from which are extreme views. That's a famous text that he wrote about emptiness, mainly from the Chittamatra point of view. But here it says, that which sees an object is a primary consciousness. That which sees its attribute or features is a mental factor. De la duntong nambar she, de kepar semlejung. So a primary mind just perceives the mere entity of the object. That part of the nature of the mind, the same entity of the mind, which is apprehending features or differences of the object, its distinguishing characteristics, or its color, its shape, it experiencing it in terms of feeling and so forth, or discriminating it, having clarity about it with wisdom or whatever. All of those are called mental factors. They're not different from the primary mind itself. They're one entity, but they're still differentiable, just like the waves. Are the waves, can you separate the waves from the ocean? Who's the big surfer here? Okay, Chris. Can you separate the wave? Can you get like a wave without ocean?
We have wave machines.
That's interesting. You mean like on a rubber surface or something?
They have that, and they have ones that just create one of the cool.
Yeah, but you still need water, right? Can you have a wave without water? That would be interesting. Okay, no, but I'm talking about ocean. Yeah. Can you imagine? That would be kind of interesting. You can't have wave. Wave is the same entity as the ocean, right? As the water. But it is conceptually different than the water itself, right? That which is just clear and so forth. So this particular kind of explanation is said to be kind of a meditator's presentation of mind and mental factors in terms of differentiating. The mind knows the mere entity of the object and of the perceptual field, and the mental factors are that part of the same consciousness which are engaging in it in different ways, the various features of it. So let's leave right there and just do a very short dedication. And those of you who've studied Buddhism a little bit know that dedication is a mental activity. It's not just a verbal activity. In a sense, it's a kind of prayer, but a prayer, an aspiration that the virtue that we've created tonight and in the past, and even the virtue that we'll create in the future, would have a particular kind of result. One can dedicate the same merit again and again. It's not like, oh, I already dedicated it, I can't dedicate it again. You can dedicate it again and again. Think, for instance, due to this merit of listening tonight, creating with a positive motivation, may I be able to identify this nature of my mind, mental factors, be able to identify very quickly the negative states of mind, learn their shortcomings and develop the antidotes, both temporal and ultimate, against them. May I be able to identify the positive states of mind and cultivate them. And in so doing, may I quickly develop all the good qualities, develop compassion for others, altruism, eliminate my faults, become not only a happy, content, and inspiring person, but able to lead others to that same kind of spiritual wholesomeness. May I quickly become enlightened due to these merits for the welfare of all sentient beings.